Hi guys, welcome to my upstairs hallway. Yep, we had to move because the kids decided not to go to sleep right away. That's okay, we can read up here too. Alright, so anyway, back to what just went down in our story. This guy, Arthur, this other person that that Compeyson had been partners with, the other guy that was doing Compeyson's dirty work for a while, starts freaking out. He's having these nightmares. And Magwitch remembers being over there when he was having a really bad nightmare. About halfway down 177 after that large paragraph, Compeyson's wife then goes and attempts to make him feel better. So Compeyson's wife and me took him up to bed again, and he raved most dreadful. "Why, look at her," he cried out. "She's shaking that shroud at me." Compeyson's wife, being used to him, gave him something to get the horrors off, and by he quieted. "Oh, she's gone. Has her keeper come for her?" he says. "Yes," said Compeyson's wife. He rested pretty quiet till it might want a few minutes of 5, and then he starts up with a scream and screams out, "Here she is! She's got that shroud again! Don't let her throw it over my shoulders! Don't let her lift me up! Oh, she's lifting me up! Keep me down!" And then he lifted himself up hard and was dead. Compeyson took it easy, as good riddance for both sides, and him and me was soon busy. Not to go into things that Compeyson planned and I done, which would take a week, I simply say to you, dear boy and Pip's comrade, that man got me into such nets as made me his slave. I was always in debt to him, always under his thumb, always a-working and always getting into danger. He was younger than me, but he'd got craft, and he'd got learning, and he overmatched me 500 times told, and no mercy. My missus, as I had the hard times with, but nope, I'm not bringing her in. "There ain't no need to get into that," he said. "The time with Compeyson was the most hardest time as ever I had. That said, all said. Did I tell you that I was tried, alone, for misdemeanor while with Compeyson?" I answered no. Well, I was, and got convicted, as it took up on suspicion. That was 2 or 3 times in the 4 or 5 years that it lasted, but evidence was wanting. At last, me and Compeyson was both convicted for felony, on a charge of putting stolen notes in circulation. There are other charges behind. Compeyson says to me, separate defenses, no communication. And that was all. And I was so miserable poor, and I had sold all the clothes I had, except what hung on my back, before I could get Jaggers. When we was put up on the dock, I noticed, first of all, what a gentleman Compeyson looked, with his curly hair, and his black clothes, and his white pocket handkerchief, and what a common sort of wretch I looked. When evidence was given in the box, I noticed how it was always me that had come forward and could be sworn to, how it was always me that the money had been paid to, how it was always me that seemed to be to work the thing and get the profit. But when the defense came on, when I could see the plan plainer, for says the counsellor for Compeyson, "My lord and gentlemen, here you as for you, side by side, 2 persons as your eyes could separate wide, one the younger, well brought up, who is spoke to as such, and one the elder, ill brought up, who will be spoke to as such. One the younger, seldom if ever seen in these here transactions, only suspected. The other, elder, always seen in them, and always with his guilt brought home, and such like. And weren't it me who had been tried before, and had been known up the hill and down the dale, in the bridewells and lockups? And when it came to speech-making, weren't it Compeyson who could speak to him, with his face dropping every now and then into his white pocket handkerchief, and with verses in his speech too? And weren't it me who could only say, 'Gentlemen, this man at my side's a most precious rascal'? And when the verdict came, weren't it Compeyson who was recommended on mercy on account of good character and bad company, and giving up all the information he could against me? And weren't it me who never got a word in but guilty? When I says to Compeyson, 'Once out of this court, I'll smash that face of yours.' Ain't it Compeyson that prays to the judge to be protected? And when we're sentenced, ain't it him who gets 7 years and me 14? I had said to Compeyson that I'd smash that face of his, and I swore Lord smash mine to do it. And we was in that same prison ship, I couldn't get at him for long, although I tried. At last I came behind him and hit him on the cheek and turned him round and got smashing one at him. And when I was seen and seized, that black hole of a ship weren't a strong one to judge of black holes if that could swim and dive. I escaped to the shore and was a hide among these graves there, envying them that was in 'em, and all over, when I first seen my boy. By my boy, I was given to understand that Compeyson was out on them marshes too. Upon my soul, I half believed he escaped in his terror to quit of me, not knowing it was me that had got ashore. I hunted him down, and I smashed his face. And now, says I, as the worst thing I can do, caring nothing for myself, I'll drag you back. And I'd have swum off, torn him by the hair if it had come to that, and I'd have got on board without those soldiers." "Is he dead?" I asked after a silence. "Is who dead, dear boy?" Compuson. He hopes I am, if he's alive, you can be sure, with a fierce look. Never heard no more of him. Herbert had been writing with his pencil on the cover of a book, and he softly pushed the book over to me so that I could read it. And I read in it, young Havisham's name was Arthur. Compeyson is the man who professed to be Miss Havisham's lover. Wait, what? Okay, so Compeyson, the guy that Magwitch was beating the crap out of in the marshes, the guy that Magwitch did all the dirty work for, the guy who looked like a gentleman on the outside, but was a jerk face on the inside. This is the guy that Miss Havisham loved and was stood up at the altar for. Yeah, I know, right? So, not only that, but Arthur, the guy that was freaking out about the woman in white who was coming to smother him with her shroud, that was Miss Havisham's brother. So in like his last moments of life, he was imagining that Miss Havisham was smothering him with her wedding veil. Payback will get ya. Anyway, so yeah, giant piece of the puzzle put together. Compeyson, the second convict, was Miss Havisham's ex-lover. And Magwitch hates Compeyson because when they were tried together, Compeyson pulled out the, look at me, aren't I a good gentleman? And look at him, he's a little scumbag. And that was essentially the guy's defense. And because the courts were fairly corrupt back then, they're like, oh yeah, you're right, he's a scumbag. You look like a gentleman, you get off with less of a sentence than the other guy. Which is complete crap. But anyway, that's what happened. Okay, so, Chapter 42 happens, and it's essentially, Pip decides that he needs to go back and talk real quickly to Miss Havisham because he feels as though he needs to say, yo, Havisham, what the heck? Like, you totally screwed me for 20 years of my life. What the heck? So he goes, and on his way there, he runs into Drummle. So for some reason, Drummle's hanging out at the Blue Boar at the Three Jolly Bargemen in Pip's hometown. And Pip's like, dude, what are you doing here? And Drummle talks about how he came to meet a beautiful young lady's mother. So it's very sad. So, chapter 43, Pip goes to Miss Havisham. Estella is there. Miss Havisham and Estelle, and he doesn't care. He's like, I'm just going to call her out. So he pretty much says, yo, Havisham, what the heck? Like, you let me believe this was you for all of these years, and now it's not you, and I look like an idiot, and I feel like a dummy. And for what? For, like, what was your purpose? And Miss Havisham really doesn't have a good answer. She, Pip's like, Pip and Estella are both like, Pip says, why can't you just be kind? And Miss Havisham says, who am I to be kind? Who's ever been kind to me? My whole life has been the miserable disaster zone. Kind? What? And so they are having this conversation, and Pip is becoming more and more frustrated with the fact that, that everything's kind of falling apart. And Pip says, Estella, why is Drummle in town? And Estella says, because he's courting me. We're dating. And Pip's like, well, you can't love Drummle. And she's like, you're right, I don't. But I really don't love anybody. And Pip's like, do you have any idea how much, like, I love you? How much I'm totally infatuated with you? And just my whole being surrounds and revolves around your existence. And the whole time I was like, oh, stop. No, you don't really love me. It's no big deal. So real quick, I want to jump to page 185. Because I think this is just so gut-wrenching. We're going to jump to page 185, and halfway down the page, Pip's like, do you have any idea how this is going to affect me? How I'm going to feel when you are married to Drummel, when you are Drummel's wife. I hate Drummel. I can't even, like, seeing you in town at the parties, at different places, out at the coffee shop, like, that's going to crush me. He's like, can you even imagine what that's going to be like? And Estella says, oh, nonsense, she returned. Nonsense. This will pass in no time. Again, we're on 185. Never, Estella. Oh, you will have me out of your thoughts in a week. And Pip completely pours out his whole being here. He says, out of my thoughts? You are part of my existence, part of myself. You have been in every line that I have ever read since I first came here. That rough, common boy whose poor heart you wounded even then. You have been in every prospect I have ever seen since. On the river and the sails of ships, in the marshes, in the clouds, in the light, in the darkness, in the wind, in the woods, in the sea, in the streets. You have been the embodiment of every graceful fancy that my mind has ever become acquainted with. Estella, to the last hour of my life, you cannot choose but remain part of my character. Part of the little good in me, and part of the evil. But in this separation, I associate you only with the good, and I will faithfully hold you to that, always. For you must have done me far more good than harm. Let me feel now what sharp distress I may. God bless you, and God forgive you. And then he holds her hand, kisses it, and walks out of Estella's life. Heartbroken, completely destroyed, but walks out of Estella's life. He walks home because he's so completely distraught about everything. And when he gets home at the end of chapter 43, he gets a letter. And the letter is a letter from Wemmick. And it says, don't go home. And Pip's like, oh, crap. All right. So, Pip spends the night in a hotel. The next morning, he heads to Wemmick's house. When he gets to Wemmick's house, he finds out that Wemmick overheard when Wemmick was visiting the prisons that the prisoners and the guards were kind of gossiping that Magwitch is back, Magwitch is back, Magwitch is back. And so Wemmick also heard that Pip was being watched. And so when Wemmick heard this, him and Herbert went to Pip's house, got Magwitch, scooped him up, took him to a secret safe house, which actually turns out to be Herbert's fiance's house. So Magwitch is now going to be staying in Herbert's fiance's house. And so anyway, Pip then spends the night with Wemmick. And and he also hears, I'm so sorry, Wemmick also hears not only that Magwitch is back, but that Compeyson is also back. And Compeyson is part of the group of people that are watching Pip and watching for Magwitch. So that's just bad news bears for pretty much, I don't know, everyone involved. Okay, so we're gonna do chapter 45 because we just have a few more minutes, and I think that if we can kind of get another chapter under our belts, then we might have a better chance of plowing through the rest of this in my Friday edition of Digital Crep Reading Great Expectations. I don't know, I need to come up with a crafty name for this little digital sessions, but I haven't figured one out yet. So if you come up with one, let me know. Okay, so chapter 45, he being Pip. In chapter 45, Pip then goes to Herbert's fiance's house to find out if Magwitch is doing okay, to make sure everything's, hunky-dory and rainbows and butterflies. So he has yet to go home. Pip has not gone back to his apartment yet. So the people that are watching his apartment don't know that he's back in town. So on page 195, of course, Pip meets Clara, Herbert's fiance, on the way up. Magwitch is staying on the top floor of the house, and so Pip meets Herbert's fiance, and she's wonderful and kind and sweet and caring, just like Herbert, which is great. They're a perfect match. And so Pip goes all the way up to the top floors and sees Magwitch there, and then they have a conversation. So page 195, third of the way down, Magwitch sees Pip and says, dear boy, he answered with a grave nod. Jaggers knows. He said, he was asking whether or not whether everybody was kind of informed of the plan. And then Pip says, then I have talked with Wemmick, said I, and have come to tell you what the caution he gave me and what advice. I told him how Wemmick had been heard that he was under some suspicion and that my chambers had been watched. How Wemmick had recommended his keeping close for a time and my keeping away from him, and that Wemmick said about getting him abroad. I added that, of course, that when the time came I would go with him, or should follow close upon him, as might be safest in Wemmick's judgment. So now Pip is not only planning on getting Magwitch out of the country, but also going with him, because he feels very much responsible for Magwitch, because all this stuff that Magwitch gave him, one, and two, because he's so he's in so much danger, and it's because of Pip, and Pip feels responsible for that. So it's really, really important to Pip that he kind of sticks with Magwitch at this point. Herbert, who had been looking at the fire, pondering here and there, said something that came into his thoughts arising out of Wemmick's suggestion, which might be worthwhile to pursue. We're both good watermen, Handel, and could take him down the river ourselves when the time seems right. No boat would then need to be hired for the purpose, and no boatman, and that would save at least chance of suspicion. Any chance is worth saving, never mind the season. Don't you think it might be a good thing if you began to row, and keep a boat at the temple stairs, and were in the habit of rowing up and down the river? You'd fall into that habit, then who notices or minds? Do it 20 or 50 times, and there's nothing special in doing it the 21st or the 51st. So they decide to come up with this scheme. And this is their scheme. Pip is going to buy a boat. And he's going to keep the boat at a little dock beside his apartment. And we had talked about this at I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, but how rowing, we have rowing machines. This is the original rowing. Rowing was a very common form of exercise for gentlemen. And so Pip buys a boat and puts a boat at the dock by his apartment and starts rowing up and down the river past the house where Magwitch is staying. He's not allowed to go visit Magwitch because if he's seen going into this house, people might be suspect something and might follow him and find Magwitch. So he's trying to keep Magwitch hidden. So he decides to start rowing up and down the river. Well, in doing so, the way he's going to communicate with Magwitch is going to open the blinds or shut the blinds a certain level so that Pip can see it and say, okay, everything's fine. So if the shade comes down halfway, everything's good. We're good. Everything's good. And that's their form of communication. Clearly, text messaging, not an option back then. Okay, so they decide on this plan. And so we're going to flip to page 196 at the top, and it says, our conference now being ended and everything arranged, I rose to go, remarking to Herbert that he and I had better not go home together, and that I would take half an hour's start of him. I don't like leaving you here, I said to Provis, though I cannot doubt you being much safer here than near to me. Goodbye. Goodbye, dear boy, he answered, clasping my hands. I don't know when we may meet again, and I don't like goodbyes. Say good night. Oh, good night. Herbert will go regularly between us, and when the time comes, you may be certain I shall be ready. Good night. Good night. All things were quiet in the temple as I had ever seen them, and the windows in the rooms of that side, lately occupied by Provis, were dark and still, and there was no lounger in the garden court. Next day I set myself to get the boat. It was soon done, and the boat was brought round to the temple stairs and lay where I could reach her within a minute or two. And then I began going out for training and practice, sometimes alone, sometimes with Herbert. At first I kept above Blackfriar Bridge, but as the hours of the tide changed, I looked towards the London Bridge. The first time I passed the Mill Pond Bank, Herbert and I were pulling a pair of oars, and both in going and returning we saw the blind towards the east come down. Herbert was rarely there, less frequently than 3 times a week, and he never brought me a single word of intelligence that was at all alarming. Still, I knew that there was cause for alarm. I could not get rid of the notion of being watched. Once received, it is a haunting idea. How many undesigning persons I suspected of watching me, it would be hard to calculate. So Pip starts getting really super nervous. He starts thinking he's being watched all the time. Really, 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 really uncomfortable. And it's starting to really wear on him mentally and emotionally. So, yeah, so I won't be here on Friday either. I'll have another one of these video sessions for you. You're just loving these, I'm sure. And I hope to see you Monday in the wonderful world that is Mrs. Crap. I will not be here Tuesday either due to a conference. Oh, guys, please don't hate me. I promise I'll be back. I'm not falling off the face of the earth. And I think that's my story. So I will see you again tomorrow. Have a great St. Patrick's Day. Enjoy your time. Don't forget about course sites. You've got some discussion boards. We definitely just finished the 34 through, what is it? 32 through 44. We finished that. So you have that discussion board to do. And we just met Magwitch. So we learned a lot about him. And he has some Facebook posts that need done. So you should be wrapping those up in your spare time for the rest of this week. So if you have a study hall or spare time in a class or something going on, that would be the time to use. All right. Well, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Hope all is well. Hang in there. Thank you so much for being patient and understanding. Bye, guys.